Good day, friends. I hope everyone is doing well at their homes. I wanted to take this opportunity to give you a tour of some of my instruments. As some of you know, I collect instruments and I like to play as many of them as I can whenever possible. And so most of the instruments that I have and can play are here on the wall or in front of the wall. I like to keep them available so that if I get an inspiration to play one, or if I have something in me that wants to that I want to express musically, I can do it as quickly as possible. I'm gonna start with the piano. As many of you know, I think it's really important to have a good idea about what the piano does and the kinds of sounds that it makes and the way the notes are laid out. And as some of you have probably heard during our class time, it's got a series of patterns of 2 black notes and then 3 black notes and then 2 and then 3. And we sort of use that pattern to give us a reference point. And as also many of you know, whenever I want to find a C, which is a really important note in music, I use my 2 fingers to press the 2 black keys. And then I put my thumb down right next to it. And then I know that that's a C. So anywhere I do that on the piano, whether it's 2 fingers here and then put my thumb down, or it's 2 fingers here and put my thumb down, that's always going to be a C. And we're going to talk about that a lot more as the year goes on, because the C is a really important note in music. It's easy to play a C major scale if you only use the white keys. And so that's why a lot of people focus on the C major scale. We're going to talk about other scales, and we're going to talk about how to use these black notes. But for now, we want to be really oriented with the C major scale. If you have a piano at home, or if you are able to find an online resource, which we'll also talk about, you'll find that getting your hand in position on that C major scale is going to help you play a lot of songs. And so for me, when I was young, the piano was sort of the first instrument that I was introduced to, although it was a small keyboard about this long and it maybe had 2 octaves. But I played it a lot whenever I could. A similar instrument to that, and this was probably about the size of my electric keyboard when I was young, is the melodica, which is an instrument that you blow into in order to make sound. And it's got all these octaves, 1, 2, 3 octaves to make music. When I got a little bit older, I was probably close to 12 or so, I started playing the upright bass. So this is the instrument that I have probably the most training on, that I've spent the most years playing. It's a string instrument, as you can see. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4 notes, and they are low notes. Some of the lowest notes that we hear in the orchestra are played by the bass. As I got a little bit older, I started playing the guitar as well. So although we've talked about whether the piano is a string instrument or a percussion instrument, we know that it has strings. And so I have a fair amount of experience on string instruments. We've got a guitar here. This is actually electric guitar that goes along with this amplifier here. And when you plug it into the amplifier, it makes it louder. Usually when you play it, you probably can't even hear that. As opposed to an acoustic guitar, which it makes the sound louder by projecting it through all this wood and the sound hole. So when I pluck those strings, it's a lot louder. You can really hear that one. This one's actually set up for left-handed. And this is a right-handed guitar. We've got our mandolin here, which is similar to a guitar because it has strings, but it's got 2 strings for each note. And so it just gives it a fuller sound when it's in tune. It sounds really nice to have 2 strings playing a single note instead of 1. This is an electric version of the upright bass. You'll notice though, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strings instead. And there are lots of guitars that have modifications that add strings or that add frets to them, but this is the bass in electric form. So I would plug it in to an amplifier similar to that one, and we'd be able to hear it. But when you don't plug it in, you don't really get much sound from it. So, I'll mention also violin, which is like a small bass, and also our banjo, which I think some of you have seen in class. If not this one, then we had a different banjo. So string instruments all around. I've even got this weirdo thing here that doesn't necessarily play any particular notes, but it's kind of fun because you can drop these little balls and they just bounce on strings. So I'm all about string instruments. I do them a lot. But as I learn more about music, I like to delve into different areas. So as many of you know recently, I started playing the trombone some years ago, and it is a brass instrument. We know that because it's got this mouthpiece right here that removes and that we buzz into. And just like the trombone is a brass instrument, so is this cornet. And it looks very much like a trumpet, and it plays much like a trumpet, but also has a mouthpiece that you buzz into, and little valves that you press. Also something that I think we've seen in class. So that's the brass instruments to go with the string instruments. Very recently, we were introduced to the slide whistle and the recorder, which are woodwind instruments. Even though neither one of them is wood, we call them woodwind instruments because they have a reed, a thin piece of wood or plastic that air goes over and vibrates. And that's how they make their sound. And as many of you probably know, the last class of instruments that we talked about in class is the percussion instruments. And those are all over the place, really. We've got this cowbell here, and this steel drum here, and that tambourine there, and so many other things really that we classify as our percussion instruments. Whenever you tap something and it vibrates, we call that a percussion instrument. So I do my best to learn about these instruments and to maybe play a song or two on each of them. If you saw any instruments here that I did not mention, please comment with a question about them, because I'm happy to talk about all the instruments that I have. And in fact, there are several that I know I didn't talk about, and I would love to hear from you about what you think they are and how you might use them. And then I can also just tell you what they are and how you use them. So keep me updated with all of your musical questions and also your musical adventures, and we'll have lots of fun this semester talking about that.